I like nothing better than finding out how other people do stuff, and I'm out in the paddock today in the Hunter Valley with Andrew from Elite Rural Services and Matt from Sneddon's Fencing. Now you guys both agree on a lot of things when it comes to stay-end assemblies and hardwood posts, but you have slightly different ways of doing things, and so you're going to walk us through one end assembly each, the way you do it.
Correct.
What do we agree on with end assemblies, and what's the biggest mistake that people make, guys? We were just talking about it off camera.
It's height for me, definitely
height for you. Yep. So what do you go for height, Matt? What's your
height
guide?
Around, I was shown around third wire height, which is about 800 mil.
Yep.
It's got to be just below the center of the, just above, sorry, the center of the post. Too low it'll pull, and too high it'll rotate the post out over time.
It'll jack it out of the ground.
Jack it out of the ground.
So we want our stay going in just over centre, but we don't want it too high.
Correct, yes.
No,
Andrew?
Exactly the same with me. I couldn't
100%
agree more.
agreement?
There's a lot of ones we see around the area, both Matt and myself, where someone's put the stay in right at the top, thinking obviously being higher up, more leverage, like the post is braced a little bit better being high, but that's not the case.
You drive past it in 12 months and it's jacked out of the ground.
Exactly right. Plus looking at...
Good. Well, who's up first? Who's putting the end assembly in?
Andrew and Scott from Elite.
All right, let's see how you do it, guys. Talk us through the process of putting in your perfect end assembly.
No
and then we'll go and see what Matt does.
Yes, we'll see. Okay, so we're over here with Scott. Scott's going to show us how to put a stay in the strainer here. Pretty simple process, but I'll try my best to narrate you through what he's doing. First thing that we normally look at with the stay is which end is straight. We don't want to have an ugly looking end sticking up here, something that's bowed. We'd rather put the deformed bit down the bottom in the ground. We also try to look for any other things, knots and other things like bits in the post itself that could be deformed and be a weakness for the fence. So what Scott's done, he's chosen the best end to cut. What we're trying to achieve is a nice square or rectangle in the end of the post, which will just mean when he puts it up to the strainer here, it's a lot easier to plunge in to a nice squared off section. So we'll watch him do that now. Normally trying to aim for about sort of 30 degrees on each side of the post. Nice straight cuts, and we'll do that around all four sides. Okay, so now all four sides are cut, and we've achieved that little square on the end of the post that we're describing before. What he's done, he's on his top edge, he's flattened that off just to make a nice rounded bit. When it goes in the post, it kind of helps it guide in there. And he's also going to cut it at about a 30-degree angle on the end. So the bit that he's rolled off, which is the top face, he's now going to cut that back on a 45. So then when it goes into the post, it sits against a nice flat end. Rightio, now that end's cut, we're going to turn to the opposing end, so the end that's going to be in the ground. We're going to cut that end, so when we put the split post in, which anchors it in, it'll be sitting with its face touching the other face perfectly. So if you can imagine the post going in at an angle like this, obviously if that end's flat like that, you've only got one radius that's touching the post. We kind of want the most of the stay post touching the split, so we're going to kind of round it off like that. So that's what he's doing next. Okay, so Scott's done a good job. He's cut both ends, the top and the bottom. So now we're going to move back to the strainer and we're going to mark out our heights. Now, we're after about 800 mil off the ground or just slightly above centre of the post. In this case, we normally use mattic handle to dictate that. So sit your mattic handle next to it. We're going to do a measurement at the top, just mark it off. So that's going to be our top cut of the stay when we sit that into it. So the next thing we're going to do, hold the stay up to that top mark that we just made, and with the bottom in line obviously with the fence line, and then he's going to mark all four sides, top, sides and bottom. Okay, now everything's marked. We're going to get the saw and we're just going to do 4 nice plunge cuts into the strainer, the sides, top and bottom. And then we'll use the mattic that we used to mark the top height. We'll use that to break this core out. Alright, so now Scott's taken the core out of that. Now we're going to sit the post back up, put it into here, and then with the assistance of the chain block down the bottom here, we'll put that around the back of the post. That'll do its job by holding the post into here and let him plunge on those first cuts that we did down either edge into the timber, and then we'll ratchet it up and crank it in. Okay, so he's just starting the saw up now. These first few plunge cuts literally only be to get the post, just to get the stay into the post, and then we're going to turn to the opposing end and then dig it into the ground to do our final cuts. Just got to be careful not to crank it too much, because the more you crank that, the more the strainer will tend to fall over. Okay, once there's a nice tight fit like that, we'll end up turning to the other end. We'll dig the other end in, and then we'll do our last couple of trim cuts on that, just to get the angle correct into the strainer. So what we're aiming to do here, because we've still got a few cuts to go on the top end, we've got to allow enough room for the split post to go into the end of the stay. And to do that, probably allowing about, just very rough, about 50mm past it, where we'll start digging the hole. And then we're going to go nice and evenly up both sides of the stay. Let's begin. Okay, so that depth is now correct. So we're roughly sitting about 100mm below the sort of grade final height here where the grass grows. A few reasons for that. As soon as it rains, we don't want the top of it rotting out the top of the stay. It buries it, looks nice, it's nice and firm in the ground, there's hardly any sideways movement being at that depth. Now that that end's done, we're going to turn back to the strainer end, and obviously because that side's been dropped down so far, it's going to change the angle that this cut that Scott last did has went into the post. So we're just going to sit the saw on here, plunge that in, tidy up any side edges just to make these cuts and the stay fit into the strainer perfectly. Okay, so what Scott's doing now, he's just dug out a little bit more room around the end of the stay just to make enough room for the split post to fit in behind it. What we're trying to achieve is the split post to be hard up against the stay, so there's no movement towards the direction of the fence line. And now that he's set that in position, we're going to come over there with the rammer, and we're going to plop that on top, ram the split post into its finished height, and that'll set the stay and the strainer in position. Check the position of the split post. It's in line with the centre of the strainer and the rest of the fence line, so now we're going to start ramming it in. I suppose things to look out for here is if the split post starts wandering towards the stay, we've got to make sure that the strainer's not getting forced across off plumb, so that'll be another thing that Scott will be looking at as I'm ramming this in. set in position. It's left now. Scott's just going to fill the hole back in with dirt, pack all the dirt in as best as it can be around it. As soon as it rains the first few times, everything will settle nicely into that hole. And then, yeah, it's pretty well finished here.
So that's one way of doing it. There's another way though, isn't there? There's always another way to skin a cat.
There's always two ways, so let's see how our way is much different from this.
Alright, I can't wait to see it.
So we've got the strainer set. We're just going to measure out where we're going to dig our stay hole. So I'm going to quickly do that, and then I'm going to dig the stay hole down to where I need it to be. Then I'll go ahead and cut the stay in, and then I'll set it all. So the first step here is digging the stay hole. So I'm about to cut in the stay block. I do mine a little bit different to Andrew. I cut the block out first, then I'll cut my stay. So the first step that we're going to do now is pick the height that we want, cut the block out. Once we do that, then we'll fiddle with the stay, get that set, get the blocking behind it, and then yeah, go from there.
Now Matt, I've got to ask you mate, we're going to get a lot of questions. What is it on the end of your bar here that's making the job of cutting your mortise so much safer?
It's called the Mortise Safe. So it was developed by my father back in 1994.
Yep.
The reason he started making it was he's done fencing and he had a bad kickback once and thought there's got to be a safer way of doing it. So he developed this tool that mounts on your bar. There's two sets of dogs on it.
Yep.
So there's one side is in full contact with the timber you're cutting, and you apply full revs with confidence in the saw, you'll have no kickback whatsoever. And with all dogs touching, even better even again.
And I suppose you can even judge your distance a little bit better by watching the bars here in the springs.
You can. So the larger model cuts just over 6 inches, so that's a Pro, and that's mounted on a 20-inch bar here. And then we make a Mini which fits a 15-inch bar and greater, and it does just over 4 inches as well. Check out their website for those exact measurements.
And the website's linked in the description, guys, so get onto it if you're interested.
I'm just about to break this block out. This is with one of the red belly bars that Snedden's manufacture, so they're a great bar for fencing. So now that I've cut the block out, I use that as a template for the end of the stay. So I'll take this block, I'll trace it around the desired end of the stay, and then I'll cut the stay to suit the mortise. These two cuts are longer because when you slide the stay into the block you've just cut, as it drops, the angle obviously drops, and you need a little bit more room under here so you can get a tight mortise, a tight stay in the mortise. So it's not touching the back of the block, there's still quite a fair bit to go, and it hasn't dropped down into the back of the stay hole because we've just got to dig that out a little bit more. Just take a little bit more off this stay and it should slide in. So I've got the block here. So this is just a block cut with two sides cut off, the sapwood cut off two sides. So I'm just going to quickly measure that. So it's about 360 mil, and our hole is about the same. So we should be able to slip that block in. Can you please pass me the bar? Okay, so now that's sitting flat. We're just going to take a quick running measurement from the block, right down the bottom of the block to the inside of the mortar. So we're looking at just shy of 3 meters. So we've got to take a little bit off the end of the stay, and then we'll pull that up tight with the bar, tamp the dirt behind it, and it should be good. So I'm just going to take a little bit more off the end of the stay so it slides in. It didn't quite go in as far as I wanted to go in, and I really want it to touch the back of the block. And then I've just got to cut the angle on the other end of the stay. I've just cut a slight angle on that so it sits relatively tight on that block. We'll be able to adjust that a little bit with the bar. Go down. Lift that block out a little bit. That block out. It still hasn't gone in as far as I wanted it to, so I've still got to take just a little bit off this top edge. So that's it. The only reason I take it in and out and slide it in and out and do them cuts is when I push it back in, I like to feel it hit the bottom of the block. So as I'm coming out, and you're wondering why I didn't do the cuts in, I do them cuts and push it back in, and I can feel it hits the back of the block. And that's what I want. So while I hold pressure on the back of that block, Nathan's going to grab some dirt and tamp in behind it. And he's going to throw some dirt pretty much all in the hole. And we're just going to really focus more on the back of the block first, so we're going to put some more dirt in there. And then after this, our first post actually starts at the end of this stay block. So we're also going to drive a split post in behind the block as well. So the stay's got to push against the block and push against the first post. So now that he's tamped that a bit, I'm going to pull this bar out. Tamp that a bit. Then we're going to fill in the rest of that hole. And we may even do that with the excavator, seeing as it makes it a lot easier. And then Andrew's going to come along and drive in the first split post right behind this block. And that's the stay finished.
Well, second stay done, guys, in a jiffy. Bit of a difference between the way that you guys do it, but you agree on the basics, don't you?
Definitely.
And that is stay slightly above centre in the post and well secured in the ground, and you guys both use a line post to secure your stay at the end. Matt, you've got the extra block in the ground as well.
Yep.
And there's been a couple of different ways in the way that you guys approach the fitting of the stay into the post, but both of you make sure that you've got your stay hard up against the inside of the mortise cut.
That's correct, yeah.
That's correct.
Well guys, we're going to have some fantastic comments on this video. I want to thank you very much for sharing your wealth of experience with everyone. And hopefully you invite us back again to learn some more amazing stuff. And guys, if you like this kind of video, don't forget, hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up. Plenty more on timthompson.ag, and throw some nice comments in, please guys, and support these guys and the amazing work that they do.